With the first pick of the draft last year, a year ago, maybe 10 months ago, you selected Lincoln Riley as your first overall pick. Now let's talk about it. Okay, he went 8-5. All right, their offense was outstanding. They scored 41.8 points per game, which is good for, I believe, third in the country. At their defense, though, their defense. Okay, 121st in points per game allowed. They allowed 34.4 points per game. Just abysmal. All right, just abysmal. Okay, they finished recruiting in the top 20. I believe they finished 17th in the recruiting rankings. But that's according to 24/7. I don't think that's composite, but I'm sure it's right around there. Whatever the composite, it's pretty close to that. I mean, so how do we feel? I think a lot of people have kind of jumped off the Lincoln Riley train. Is that the case with you? Like, would you draft him here again? What kind of grade are you giving Lincoln Riley? Sorry for the rapid fire questions.
No, I think it was definitely, I was probably a year too early. I bought his stock when it was at his all-time high. It's coming off a Heisman Trophy and just a surprising, jump from what they were when he got hired, I believe 5-7 a couple years ago. And then in year one, they went 10-2. They made the Pac-12 championship and they made a BCS bowl or play what's it called? New Year's Six bowl game, and everything was riding high for them. They had all this momentum, transfer portal wise. Caleb Williams was returning, but I kind of overlooked some of the deficiencies defensively and their turnover luck they had the year before, and that kind of caught back up to them. They ended up 7-5, very disappointing year. I will say, like, I'm not going to sell my stock at all because I'd sell at a huge loss, and I also do think better days are for Lincoln Riley. This offseason was really nice getting Danton Lynn. I really think that's going to work out. Maybe not this year, but maybe a couple years. You think about what Jim Knowles is doing at Ohio State right there. The transformation that's happened it took a couple years to happen to really take its roots and to see that come bear fruit in the Ohio State program. I think it's going to happen here. The grade I'd probably have to give myself probably a C plus if I'm going to be realistic about it. I think the other guys we're going to talk about here that I absolutely should have taken especially with the short-term success and even the long-term setup-wise that they're able to do at their specific programs.
Yeah, I mean Lincoln Riley wasn't. Yeah, you were buying him at a really high stock, but that doesn't mean that the stock can't return to what it was, and exceed that. You got a situation here where Malachi Nelson transfers out of there. So to me, that says Miller Moss and Jaden Mayava might be some dudes.
And they got
And
Julian Lewis coming in a couple years if he stays committed.
yeah, so it feels like this pipeline of quarterbacks may continue for Lincoln Riley. It's just going to be matter. I mean, like I said, they hired D'Anton Lynn. Are you going to see an improvement in this defense in years to come? Possibly. And if you do, like, it's going to be a pretty dangerous team in years to come. I don't know if it'll be even next year that fully kind of comes to fruition, but you know, they'll still be making bowl games. They should not be losing faith in Lincoln Riley. Like this is a long-term project, I think, in terms of rebuilding this program and the culture as well, the stadium atmosphere, which it hasn't been there, for a number of years. So this is not a this is not a 1 year plug and play Lincoln Riley guy. Yeah, I know you use the transfer portal, and you can use the transfer portal to your advantage to kind of inject life at an accelerated rate into your program, but I think the reality is just give him some time. So uh you drafted him first out of let's see, we had 14 guys that we took, 14 Power Five coaches. Where do you think you would be drafting him if you were to draft again?
He'd
Just give me a
probably go
range.
in that middle, like maybe third to fifth round there. We got a couple guys that there's probably four guys I would for sure take. Uh, Probably three or four guys I'd for sure take over him. So it depends on your poison. I do think um part of the hesitancy is the move to the Big Ten. I do think other schools and coaches on their list are more adept to thrive at their new positions and their new coaching staffs or in their new programs or in their new conferences. You look at Dan Lanning at Oregon, for example, Kalen DeBoer now at Bama, things like that. I do think that the move from the Pac-12 and USC it was almost, yes, it was a dying conference, but also wasn't really a talent-rich conference until really last year. I mean, then it really took off, and obviously Lincoln Riley and USC was in that middle of the pack there with the elite teams at the top. Oregon and Washington. But yeah, I do think maybe not next year. It's going to take a couple years, but I still am absolute firm believer that Lincoln Riley can win a national title at USC. Absolutely can. I mean, the 12-team playoff might make it harder, whatever, but also easier to get into it. And then from there, it's just you've got a crazy hot quarterback, a very good coaching staff. You can do some things in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, we like to educate our viewers, right? So let's talk about too, like where Lincoln Riley comes from, and like because if you didn't watch our previous video, like that draft, like way back when, I don't blame you if you're just joining in now. But let's just talk about Lincoln Riley, right? Like he's a head coach at Oklahoma after being promoted as an offensive coordinator there for a number of years. He was also at East Carolina as the offensive coordinator there. He's also at Texas Tech with Mike Leach. So like he's got a history of being this brilliant offensive mind, and of course you have two Heisman Trophy winners, another Heisman Trophy finalist, or is it three Heisman Trophy? It's three Heisman Trophy winners because you have Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Jalen Hurts was a finalist. I mean, it's no shock that the offensive prowess of Lincoln Riley is praised the way that it is, and it'll be interesting, of course, to see like what kind of offensive prowess in that regard, like what's that's going to do in the Big Ten, where it traditionally is a different kind of football that's being played there. I mean, yeah, sure, you have Ohio State doing what they do with their quarterbacks and receivers, but at the same time, every now and then they have a game against Northwestern where they win in a dogfight in the snow, and it's like sometimes you got to adapt in late November, and it's kind of tough. Fortunately, I think USC has a pretty favorable schedule where I don't think they're playing anywhere pretty deadly in November. At least this year, at least this year. So,
You
but
can't
we'll
avoid that
see.
forever. Yeah, I do think also look at the last 3 years of this league. It has been Michigan playing smash mouth Jim Harbaugh football, and it kind of overwhelmed Ohio State for a couple of years. And then this year, it obviously was a nail biter between those two, and maybe some better quarterback play from Ohio State would have changed that outcome. But regardless, that Michigan team was also unbelievably good as well. So I do think, yeah, like you said, it part of the reason why D'Anton Lynn, I'm really excited about because I do think it just brings some kind of culture in, some kind of change, right? Some change was needed, obviously, at USC and with Lincoln Riley's coaching staff, and obviously, we hope it works out for them. Yeah, D'Anton Lynn. Also, I was wrong by the way. He was not 10-2, and actually, it was 11-1 actually, because they were right on the fringe playoff spot, playing Utah in that Pac-12 championship a couple years ago, and lost obviously, and then ultimately lost to Tulane in that. I believe it was the Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, or whatever it was. It was Cotton Bowl. Cotton Bowl. Sorry, I think
Combo.
it's Cotton
Yep.
Bowl. But yeah, yeah.
So let me ask you this though, CD. So when Clay Helton was there, right? It was very odd because you had your uh, with COVID, right? There was a huge blip in recruiting, right? In 2019, they were ranked 20th. In 2020, they were 68th. That is not a typo. They were 68th in recruiting in the country. And then in 2021, they were 8th. And then that's when Clay Helton got fired. Lincoln Riley takes over 2022, 2023. Top 10 classes both years, right? Then 2024, you slip to 17. So, like, is there a worry there, or do we think that Lincoln Riley can supplement not having a top 10 class every once in a while to ensure that, uh, like, can he supplement these not top 10 classes that come every now and then with the transfer portal?
I think he can, but I do think that he understands, D'Anton Lynn understands that the the trenches, like the transfer portal for a program like USC, like we've seen Georgia use it, like we've seen Alabama use it, Ohio State, it should be supplementary, where the core of your roster, the elite players on your roster, and especially on the O line and D line, which they have struggled, come from the high school ranks. That's where you find your best guys. Those guys, the big interior guys defensively, the O linemen, like they don't come all that often, right, in the portal, and um, for good reason because their schools are making sure that they don't have any reason to leave the portal. So yeah, I do think that's been an emphasis. That needs to be an emphasis, a better one. This year kind of struggled. I don't know exactly what the reasoning behind it. But I do think with the new coaches that have coming in, they're already off to a really hot start for next year, which is a really nice thing to see. I think they're fourth right now. Obviously, that can change, but they got a couple 5-star guys, and they're really working the defensive side of the ball. And I think that's Danton Lin really coming right away and impacting them for this next recruiting cycle.